Hi, and welcome to Module 1, Introduction to Literary Studies. When I first decided I was going to grad school to get a master's degree in English, the most common question I would get would be simple. Why? Why study literature? First, for me, I was a reader and loved classical works. So to me, the answer was partially personal. I went to a poorly funded high school, joined the military when I was 17, and at some point in my early adulthood, I felt cheated, especially when it came to culture, outside of whatever sitcom was popular at the time. With a little help from the film Hamlet, I picked up Shakespeare on my own by way of the Mel Gibson film, if you call that Shakespeare. Then moved to Charles Dickens and Ernest Hemingway. Watching Shakespeare was great, but like a lot of people who pick up The Bard on a whim, I had trouble reading Shakespeare. I also had trouble getting into Dickens. But Hemingway was another story. Hemingway was my man. I was young, in the military, and there was just enough bravado to keep me reading and going to the next of his books. Anyone who's read Hemingway, however, understands that the author of Death in the Afternoon is a lot more than a tough guy who likes to drink and get chased by bulls in Spain. Hemingway was a master at making you feel. I remember clearly the moment I finished Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms. The ending was so sad that I couldn't read another book for weeks. The loss in this story was so personal that it felt like I'd lost someone. For me, that's one of the main reasons we read. Not to wallow in a sad story, but to empathize with others. To feel what others feel and see the world from their vantage point. Sure, you can see the same things in other fields, sociology, psychology, history, and I could go on with that list. But there's nothing like the way a good literary writer can craft a story. Now I'm talking about a master storyteller too, who can truly make you understand the pain, love, joy, and brutal heartache that surrounds us every day. That is why we read, so we can understand. Then, you might ask, why not just read books? Why do we need to study literature and study it in an academic sense? First, I should clarify one thing. While we're going to be reading books, I don't want you to think of this as a book club. It's not like that. So why do we study literature? We study literature for a number of reasons. To strengthen our critical thinking skills, broaden our horizons, learn about other peoples, develop sympathy towards others, and build our imaginations. And yes, all of those are tangible skills for any field that you will go in academia or after graduation. Football players need to know critical thinking skills and be able to employ those skills at the drop of a hat. I've never met a social worker who doesn't constantly use empathy in their daily work. To be successful in business or law, one needs expansive horizons and to be able to see how others think, live, and see the world. I can't tell you how many times I've been face to face with someone of a culture different from my own and had great discussions which built a bridge between two seemingly different human beings, all around books. However, within academia, what we do is a little different. It's what Nietzsche called the slow read or the close reading. What's so different? Instead of speed reading our way through a bucket list of books, we'll sit down with parts of the book. Instead of trying to find out what was said, we want to know how it was said. We'll look at the pace of a novel, the tone that's set to see how an author allowed you to fall into a story. Fall in love with a character, feel pain at the loss of a character, even when you know that person is fiction and never existed. How does this happen? That's what we'll be examining this week. We'll look at literary terminology, such as plot, genre, metaphor, to better understand the tools of literary critics in their dissection of a story. Realizing what happened when I read that Hemingway book is complex and deserves special attention. Long story short, in the Hemingway story, a person died. He said it, but is there more to this reading? But what if the death is a symbol of something else? What if it's symbolic for something bigger? Maybe even the names are symbolic. Maybe the slow rain that's taking place as the main character walks away should be seen as being important for the story and being important for our understanding of the text. This is why we examine how the writer was able to do what he or she does. We're exploring the how versus replaying what just happened. Since they're not real people, they only exist on the pages we read. The author is the midwife for these characters. The author brings each one into the world. But unlike a child, however, these characters are brought into a world entirely created by the author. There are few, if any, coincidences, which makes the use of a close reading essential for our understanding of the text. We want to know how this was done and how this helps us to connect to the story. We'll begin this by practicing these skills with the close reading of Tim O'Brien's short story, The Things They Carried. If you've never read this story, it's a powerful work of fiction written by a Vietnam veteran and closely chronicles O'Brien's own time during the Vietnam War. A few years ago, Tim O'Brien spoke at the University of West Florida. To hear him tell his stories about Vietnam and to see him nearly break down some 50 years after the war, demonstrates the power in his stories. We'll look at O'Brien's most famous story through the lens of a particular term. This paper is your first short paper, and I want this submitted to the Dropbox by 11:59 p.m. on this Friday. We'll also get to know each other. Make sure you post your introduction on the discussion section by this coming Tuesday, at 11:59 p.m., and respond to someone else's post by Thursday at 11:59 p.m. Make sure you follow the checklist and let me know if you have any questions. I'm looking forward to seeing what you write, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you a little bit better throughout the class. Thank you.